Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Colleen Fahey, and I'm Executive Vice President and Chief Research Officer at Viacom Media Networks. I am so pleased to be here today to present the results of our brand new study. This is the first presentation of it that I'm ever giving, so go with me. It's called The Next Normal, an unprecedented look at millennials worldwide. This groundbreaking research is the first truly global exploration of millennials and is unparalleled in scope and scale. Millennials, who are currently aged 9 to 30, make up about a third of the world's population. They're huge, and we tapped into the minds of over 15,000 of them in over 24 countries. Our goal was to understand their worldview, how growing up digital empowers them, how their culture of sharing inspires them, and how everything from the global economic crisis to family dynamics impacts their expectations for their future. In a nutshell, we sought to discover the next normal. So taking a quick step back, I'd like to touch on the role of research at Viacom. Research impacts every part of our business. It's our connections to our audience that are so important to everything that we do, from programming strategies and marketing decisions, multi-platform strategies and windowing, and of course, hoping to drive ad sales as well. It's really where we begin. It tells us when to be local and when to go global, and through our consumer insights, it also tells us where we need to be next. It basically drives reinvention across our entire business. So before I get into the findings of our study, I'd like to bring your attention to this video, which provides some more color around the next normal.
Texting, Googling, downloading, Big Brother, X Factor, Jersey Shore, the smartphone, the iPod, the iPad. Has the world gone gaga? These are the iconic breakthroughs of a new generation, the millennial generation. The largest since the boomers. 2.5 billion millennials around the globe make up about a third of the world's population. Aged between 9 to 30 years old, they're a formidable bunch with one thing in common. Technology has empowered them to demand more than any previous generation. They are better educated, more ambitious, more connected than ever. They want their say in real time via a medium of their choice, and sharing is their culture. They create, curate, and consume. In 2012, Viacom International Media Networks commissioned an in-depth global study unprecedented in scale. It included 24 countries through 19 different time zones. Our goal, to dive into the millennial mind, unravel their feelings, and discover the next normal. Okay, so we were ambitious, but so were our methods. To understand our Nickelodeon, MTV, and Comedy Central audience, we tapped into the consciousness of over 15,000 millennials from around the world. We looked at some of the big life issues familiar to millennials. Topics like redefining world events, growing up on the web, family dynamics, what they expect from life. We got lost in the unbridled imagination of the 9-year-old, scanned the brainwaves of self-discovery in teenagers, and discussed the informed opinion of those with more life experience. We sought to understand what makes them happy, who are the most important people in their lives, and how they connect to the wider world. By gauging the mindset of this very wide and complex demographic, we caught a glimpse of the future. Research is where we begin. It shapes our brands, inspires our content, and helps us to communicate with the next generation of consumers. This research study is a definitive guide to the evolution of the millennial. The Next Normal is Viacom's unprecedented look at millennials worldwide.
He's so enthusiastic. Okay, today I have very little time to tell you about a very big study, so I'm going to really whip through this. I'd like to start with the factors that shaped this generation. So millennials were born into an era of Reagan, Gorbachev, and the latter days of the Cold War. But today, they're living in a world of Obama, Putin, and the war on terror. In the entertainment sphere, they span the years from a young Madonna to Lady Gaga, from Super Mario Brothers to Angry Birds, and technologically, the velocity of change they've grown up with is, of course, unprecedented. So we tested a number of events from the past 10 years, cultural, economic, technological, and identified the top factors that have touched this generation. So let's count down from just 3. Natural disasters rank as the third most impactful factor. At the global and local level, large-scale natural disasters can make a huge impact, and they're still felt years later. Millennials had the strongest global response to the earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear scare in Japan. 63% of millennials around the world feel personally touched by this event, and the ripple effects are still being felt across the world, from the speeding up of the nuclear energy shutdown in Germany to policy reversals in European countries like Italy and Switzerland, to the slowdown of nuclear developments in many Asian countries like China. Number 2 comes acts of terrorism, which form the second most impactful category. 58% of young people globally feel personally touched by 9/11, and 54% feel personally impacted by the summer camp shooting in Oslo. But it's at the local level that we see these man-made disasters having an even stronger impact than many natural disasters. 87% of Indian millennials felt personally impacted by the 2008 Mumbai bombings, 81% of American millennials by 9/11, and 63% in the UK by the 7/7 bombings. The key takeaway here is that we live in a time where all parts of the world are impacted by the fear of terror and terrorist attacks. Now, before we get to the number 1 factor impacting millennials today, I'd like to make a quick note about the role of technology. Now, this is a bit of a conundrum because we found that technology, rather than being a defining factor for this generation, is really just an enabler. It's a normal part of their lives. While we tend to put that tech label on them, that's just not how they see themselves. A millennial might say, technology doesn't make me who I am, it lets me be who I am. Being tech savvy is the next normal. Now, Egypt is the one country that stands out in regards to the significant role technology plays in young people's lives, as social media was, of course, key in the Arab Spring. And now, the big reveal. The number 1 factor impacting millennials today at a personal level, the economy. A full 68% of millennials around the world feel personally touched by the global economic crisis. And these numbers increase at the local level. 85% in Italy, 84% in Spain, 80% in Greece feel personally impacted. In all 3 of these countries, youth unemployment and austerity stand out as the top economic issues on both a local and global level. We're seeing economic doubt and concern across the board, even in countries like Australia that haven't even been badly hit by the global financial crisis. The crisis gets personal for millennials when it comes to their job prospects. Half of the world's young people today believe job security will continue to worsen, and they're facing up to a harsh reality about the future. A full 78% would rather have a minimum wage job than no job at all. This is the first time that we've seen unemployment trump world hunger as the top global issue that young people want to see solved. Solving unemployment also beats out curing cancer and ending the global economic crisis itself. Another expression of their concern about the economy and jobs is how young people today feel about their futures in comparison to their parents. Fewer millennials believe they'll earn more than their parents, which was not the attitude of Gen Xers or boomers before them. While 47% of kids in 2006 strongly agreed with the statement, "I will earn more than my parents," that percentage is down to 26% for those same kids in this new post-crisis era. With no solution in sight, this belief has become the next normal. All right, there's a lot of gloom and doom. It's pretty heavy, it's pretty intense. But they're concerned. There's a lot of global worry out there, and of course, it led us to wonder, how are these millennials coping? So we measured how they feel about themselves and their lives today. And what we found was surprising and frankly, completely heartening. Millennials today demonstrate an amazing duality and capability for embracing a strong sense of happiness and optimism while living in these uncertain times. Over 3/4 of millennials around the world actually describe themselves as very happy. In fact, our data shows an upward trend in happiness. Millennials today are even happier than they were back in 2006. We found that the happiest millennials are in Latin America, in countries like Argentina, where the economy and employment levels have been on the rise for the past 10 years, and Brazil. I mean, Brazil is a great place, right? But they also have a lot to look forward to. The Football World Cup in 2014, the Olympics in 2016, but there's also been a boom in manufacturing development and a growing consumer market. There are some countries that ranked a bit lower on our happiness scale, and they unfortunately have good reason. Events in Egypt and Japan have undoubtedly impacted young people's happiness, while soaring youth unemployment in Italy and Greece is tempering happiness levels as well. Now, let's take a look at what's driving this happiness for millennials. First and foremost, it's the basics. It's something very hopeful. It's spending time with family and friends. This reinforces the shift in family dynamics that has occurred with the millennial generation. Families today are closer knit. Young people are not trying to escape like Gen Xers or rebel like boomers. They choose to be part of the family unit. All of our research over the past few years has pointed to the growing importance of family bonds, and this study, based on the widest ever cross-section of millennials, confirms that this is actually a global phenomenon. Now, second only to family, friendships are another key driver of happiness. Overall, there is actually a trend towards smaller circles of real-life friends compared with online friends, which are skyrocketing. Over the past 6 years, the number of best friends has stayed about the same. But the wider circle of everyday friends is shrinking, a pattern we're seeing in a lot of countries. Millennials are more interested in being a very accepted, integral member of a smaller group rather than a larger group. On the other hand, millennials average well over 200 online friends. In the past year, we've seen a significant jump in the number of online contacts who they consider friends but have never actually even met. Our research shows 3/4 of millennials believe social media has a beneficial effect on relationships with friends. So it's typical for an 11-year-old to already have one social media account, and by the time they're 15, they probably have at least 3 social media profiles. Now, I just want to say that I'm touching very little on social media today. We're actually in the field with a global exploration on social media right now, which we will be unveiling next year. So stay tuned for that. Last, let's quickly shift our lens to the wider world. We found another interesting duality in how millennials feel about their own country and its place in the world, something that we see as a mix of pride and tolerance. 4 in 10 millennials think life would be better if they lived in another country. This grass is greener attitude is most common in Italy, Poland, and Greece. But at the same time, and this is where we're seeing the duality emerge, national pride levels are up. 83% agree, I'm proud to be from wherever it is, Brazil or the US or what have you, which is up from 77% in 2006. Now, an important layer of this is maintaining local traditions, which is becoming more important to millennials, especially in Germany, the UK, and China. But greater pride in country and local traditions is not closing this generation off from the rest of the world. In fact, we're seeing millennials today saying it's great to have people from other countries come to live in their country, from 68% in 2006 to 76% in 2012. Again, the duality emerges, a combination of pride and tolerance, and a growing sense of community at both the national and international levels. 84% of millennials say, my age group has the potential to change the world for the better. Having this global view and really being global citizens is the next normal. So in conclusion, the millennial experience is shaped by chaos and crisis and change. Economic uncertainty and job insecurity loom large in their lives. But this study is so full of hope and optimism. Millennials today demonstrate an amazing duality when it comes to harsh economic realities and their ability to be happy. This same spirit shines through in how they combine national pride and a growing curiosity and desire to connect with other countries and cultures. At the global level, the next normal is much more we than me. There is a sense of global community, newfound tolerance and flexibility, increased creativity, and a powerful desire to share and connect. Thank you very much for your time today. And I'd like to welcome the Roundtable discussion.
Thank you, Colleen. I think you're there. Yeah. Why don't we bring everybody up? I think that's, it's a complicated. I've always had my hats off to the people, as a journalist who doesn't have to worry. I work for Wired magazine. We know who our audience is, and we kind of target them. And marketers, how do you sell things to a collection? It's amazing. So anyway, to deal with this, we've got Geoff will introduce everybody, but just so everybody understands, the idea here is to bring in a marketing perspective, a content producer's perspective, Colleen, big network, and Geoff from eMarketer, if you guys don't know who it is, founder and CEO, one of our favorite guys, and a great source for information, of which I guess this will eventually end up in eMarketer as well, along with
undoubtedly
all the other stuff. Anyway, go for it, guys. Thank you.
Does everybody know who a millennial is, like by age? I think you quoted under 30. So
About 9 to 30.
Okay, so how many people in the audience, please raise your hand if you were 30 or under? Okay, please leave because we're going to be talking about you. Just kidding. No, you're entitled to stay. As Spencer was suggesting, there's a lot of different perspectives here. eMarketer looks at a lot of different data, including millennials, so I've got a lot of information and data. I also have to confess that I have 4 children, 3 of whom are millennials, so I can speak from personal experience.
Your own
But on our panel, I'm thrilled. Not only do we have Colleen, of course, which is from Viacom with VH1 and MTV, so you guys, you're talking to teenagers and millennials all day long. Then we have Miles Beckett next in, who's a next generation media company, which reaches 60 million trend-setting people, which is largely millennials, as we talked before, right? And then we've got, next is Damian from Google, Damian Burns. And of course, Google reaches millennials in all kinds of ways through search, video, social, mobile, probably every channel you can think of, certainly digitally. And then finally, we have a marketer, formerly Kraft, now Mondelēz? Mondelēz, yes. I still can't get it. My French is just as bad. This is Josep Hernandez. So we have multiple perspectives here, and we're going to get right into this because we really want to understand who millennials are, and just as importantly, what makes them different, and how marketers and media folks need to respond, or if indeed they should be. And we're going to start off with the research that you just presented. Tell us a little bit more about the methodology of how you constructed this. If I heard correctly, you actually scanned the brain waves of teenagers. And can you do that at my home? Because I'd like to understand some more things about my kids.
We talked to about 15,000 people. It was online surveys for the quant part of it. We did about 450 interviews in each country. It took us about, 7 weeks to be in the field and coordinating all of that. But before we even went into the field, we did a lot of qualitative exploration, talking to demographers and academics and other just like really smart people about the generations and millennials in particular.
Right. And tell us, because you've been at Viacom for several years now,
Yes.
right? So you've got already that perspective. Was there anything in the research data that you've looked at that was surprising or kind of caught you off guard, or something that you weren't expecting, particularly as it might relate to what marketers and media folks would want to hear about?
Well, I think that I'm exposed to an awful lot of U.S.-based research. So the fact that this was global, and the fact that that the findings were just so consistent in a global way about how millennials are wired, and the fact that their job prospects and their futures was just so widespread. Like I didn't really expect it to be that widespread, and it truly is a global economic crisis. And I would say that was something that impressed me a lot. And then just their fierce optimism, which is something that I know, but I'm like, come on, you've been batted down a lot in the past couple of years. You would have thought that you would show some cracks there, but
it made me wonder what kind of drugs are there on that makes me so happy.
There's just this, everything can be going to hell in a handbasket, but I'm going to find my way. And it's an incredible amount of confidence in themselves. And I do think that it's partly how they've been parented, and partly their ability to have a worldview, and technology has certainly paved the way for that. The world is their oyster. Marketers are really reaching out to this audience in a way that I think they feel very empowered and entitled by really the whole world and everything that it is. And
That's
so
exciting.
I don't think that, in spite of natural disasters and fear of terrorism, and the fact that they can't get anything better than a job at Starbucks right now, is really is making them say, that's it, I'm throwing in the towel.
It possibly speaks well for future generations of entrepreneurs, that they're so resilient and that they're going to find a way for themselves.
Yep.
Let me turn it around to our panelists here. We just got 10 minutes of probably 4.5, 6 hour presentation?
It can
So,
be.
but there might have been some findings that were interesting to you, either confirming something you already knew, or perhaps that you weren't expecting.
Yeah,
Anybody want
I think to what Colleen was just saying, what I found most interesting about the study is people have said very negative things, I think, about millennials in the past, that they're not serious, or that they take things too lightly, or that they've had it too easy. And I think that what we've really seen with, unfortunately, the global economic crisis is that I think actually the generation has an incredible combination now of both optimism, connectedness, intelligence, an ability to actually work on a global scale for the first time in history. But also that's tempered now a bit through what they've seen through both the acts of terrorism internationally and also the economy. And so, personally, I'm really, really excited to see what the generation increasingly does over time.
Damian, your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that. I think what was interesting is the surprise that we have at how positive they are about the world, despite what's going on and we're all aware of, and how the media's talking around the world. What I also think is that echoes a lot of findings that we're seeing in other studies around this segment. BCG did one, Google's done one called the Cassandra research project. And there are some very dangerous assumptions to be made about this generation, which will, result in misinformed marketing strategies. And I think, the more we surface the DNA and the characteristics of this audience in a robust manner, the better we'll be able to go to market.
Josep, what have you're a marketer, how do you?
Yeah, so for us at Kraft, a year ago, we were quite inspired by Viacom, I have to say. When we decided to shift from traditional targeting to targeting culture and identifying millennials as a key driver of growth, actually it has been an inspiration that one of the conclusions of that inspiration has been splitting in the company. We have split the business to Kraft North America and the global snacking business, which is Mondelēz, which is account for 65% more or less of the revenue, because basically had that inspiration of betting into the millennials, betting into emerging markets. One of the things that I find fascinating of the study is that when you look at millennials, it's up to them to take us out of the situation where we are. So as marketers, we feel the same way. It's up to them that they defined us as marketers. So when we started to come up with our targeting strategies for next year, we look at developers, for instance, and we see how all of them are millennials. All of them are millennials, and they are defining the next generation. For us, developers have become a key strategic target for the way we see the company moving forward. And all it's based in this trend that you guys actually started with MTV and the deal that we signed up with you guys at a global level. So very, very inspiring.
There's lots of different definitions of millennials in terms of what you were born and so on. But in your mind, to kind of stripping away from the dates and the numbers, what is, in your mind, and I'm going to ask each of you to chime in here, what is the one defining characteristic beyond the obvious that they've all been born with technology in their hands?
I think it's actually, so it's an interesting twist, and I think it came out of your research a bit as well, which is it's less about the fact that they have technology and use technology. It's more about the fact that it's assumed and that it's just everywhere. And I'm sort of on the cusp, so I'm 34 years old, so I'm kind of, and I have a younger brother, and I have both friends who are older than me and younger, so I kind of have seen this splitting of the Gen X to the millennials, and it's that native assumption. Whereas for me, I went to college, I got an email address when I went to college. I had dial-up through college. I had an Apple II computer. For me, technology was not an assumption. It was a cool, new, interesting thing. Whereas for younger people, it's just there. And so the interesting thing is not the tech itself, but it's actually the interconnectedness that it creates. And I think that, that's what we see the most. Every single one of so we operate a network of celebrity media properties for people. We run the websites for Jennifer Lopez and Lauren Conrad and Bethany Frankel, et cetera. And what we find is that all of our properties are social networks, and we didn't do that because it was a cool tech thing to do, but because it's an assumption. If we didn't have profile pages, if you couldn't private message, if you couldn't connect to Twitter, people just wouldn't use the websites. I think that's the most interesting component. It's just that it's there. It's pervasive.
Other points of view?
So one of the traits that I would call out, because there's kind of standard traits and common traits we see in a lot of this research, which is tech fluent, they expect things in a far shorter time frame than other generations have. One thing I'd call out is the fact these are shapeshifters, but the different thing about these guys is they're shape-shifting far quicker than anyone else. So there's actually a danger in research classifying a generation with certain traits, because that will therefore inform on your marketing strategy. But your marketing strategy could be outdated by the time you go to market, because these people are adapting and maneuvering around
brings
technologies.
new meaning to the term real-time marketing.
Absolutely, and we can talk all we want, but no one is really approaching marketing in an adaptive way.
I think that's the key to personalization.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you talk, I'll give you a few examples. I mean, there are things that people are doing now that they weren't a year ago. There are things that in 2 years' time, this generation will be doing at scale. I mean, the titanium developers, who are basically the elite of the app development world, are saying that within 3 years, 80% of them say they'll be building apps for TV and in-car. Now, you know, if you're planning right now on talking to this audience, they ain't doing that now, but they will be. And I think that kind of adaptive mindset and a more structural change is needed to embrace the opportunity that they bestow upon us.
Joseph?
I can agree with that more. I mean, we have a strong commitment. Our brands, and it's hard to go to work every day. Our brands have to grow to a double digit across all markets. That's a commitment. So speed is definitely of an essence. Another thing that I find a core essence from this audience is mobile. For us, mobile is the gateway to millennials, and for millennials, mobile is the gateway to the world. And it's incredible because when you're in a global role, you have to travel quite a bit, and you spend a lot of time on planes. And so I was just in Istanbul, and it's happened the same thing in India. It's roughly 50% of the population or more are less than 30 years old.
Yeah.
And when you're talking to them, you realize that the first thing they know, I'm originally from Barcelona. I was born in Barcelona, and I love Barcelona football team. I mean, that's my team. And if you want to get me a conversation, you start to talk to soccer with me. And the first thing they talked to me was about Messi. They knew more about the scores that we had that previous weekend than I knew from going to the trip. And the whole thing was through mobile. So we're finding we've announced and we've been pushing every single regional manager to invest 10% in mobile as a company. Yeah. That's our media budget. And
I can emphasize that in terms of looking at statistics at eMarketer. I can tell you that in huge numbers of countries, and particularly emerging markets, you will see that easily 2/3 to 3/4 of internet users and mobile users are 34 years and younger. So that's predominant pretty much across the world. Let's get into marketing and media and messaging. There are some that say that you can't advertise to millennials or this new generation in the same ways that you did before. Does anybody want to take that? Is that true, or is it the same old and we're just fooling ourselves?
I mean, I think the key is that it's about a conversation rather than about broadcasting a message. And to your point about how things change so rapidly, I mean, that's the key to sort of riding the wave of change, right? If you have a campaign or if you have a message that's dynamic and that's in conversation with the audience, then you can adjust it in real time. I mean, we do this across both the content properties that we operate, but also with the advertisers. So we did a large campaign with Kraft, actually, before it split, with Philly cream cheese for the Philly brand, where we basically were creating a cooking competition online. And the entire process was about getting people to create video content, produce those videos around cooking with cream cheese, and then uploading it online. The target was a little bit older. It was more towards moms. But actually what we found was that the majority of the women who were creating content were actually doing it with their kids. Funnily enough, even though this was an advertising campaign, it actually built a community of literally tens of thousands of people that were super excited, not just about cooking, but it actually became almost a family hub. Right. Where members, kids could basically interact with their parents.
Which is supported by the Viacom research that showed, the number one thing is hanging out with family and friends, that is really important to them.
And I think what you're saying there is, this is such an experiential generation, and they really want to not just, for things to feel very multidimensional in terms of how they can relate to a marketer or a brand. And I think that's where you see the most success, with some of the partnerships that we've done with advertisers, where we're developing something with them that's, very specific to the EMAs or the VMAs, and it's really integrated, and it makes a lot of sense for the brand, and it's different and never before seen, it lives on TV and online and on mobile, and that we develop a special app. And so you're sort of surrounding them. There's never been, one of the things that I say a lot is there's never been a better time to be a fan. Years ago, my favorite show was Seinfeld, and I had to wait till 9 o'clock on Thursday night to watch it. And then when I got to work the next day, I would talk about it. You don't have to wait for anything if your favorite show is, Revenge or something. There's a million ways that you can be sort of surrounding yourself with it any day of the week.
I'm glad you mentioned television. Are millennials still watching television?
They are more than ever. They are also, I mean, they're the ones that are spending a lot of time on mobile and online video, but they still love to watch TV, and that's why stuff like Real World and Jersey Shore and Teen Wolf and Daily Show and SpongeBob continue to do as well as they do.
But a lot of that is probably time shifted or being consumed through alternate devices or things like that.
Some
as
of
well.
it's live, some of it's
Yeah.
time
And-
shifted,
and-
some of it's VOD, some of
Right.
it's on Netflix, and of course Nielsen doesn't capture any of it,
Sure.
or not. No, they capture some of it, that which is consumed in the home. I don't even want to go in the measurement direction, but yeah.
But
Yeah.
you bring up an important media question too, which is one of expectations. And I mentioned I had 4 children, and one of them is not a millennial, but maybe he at 3 years old is the next version of this. But basically, whatever device is around, and including the big dumb TV, he expects to watch Gangnam Style, whatever he wants to watch, immediately right then and there.
Yep.
Right? Is that the prevailing expectation that marketers and media folks need to be thinking about?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you're not on the device and if you're not on the channel, then you're in trouble.
You're toast.
Yeah, you're toast. And
You're irrelevant.
I heard some stories actually from friends of mine with young kids where they expect the TV to have a touch interface too.
Yeah.
Their kids walk up to the TV and try to touch it, doesn't do anything. And I remember before I switched over to an iPhone, I'd take my BlackBerry over to friends' houses with kids and they'd touch the screen and it wouldn't do anything. They would think it was broken. So I think definitely the pervasiveness is an absolute requirement. And if content brands and consumer brands aren't there, then they're in trouble.
A related concept is multitasking, and we all know that millennials are notorious for their abilities to be on 2 or 3 or 4 devices at once. Talk to us about what you've seen personally and any data or case studies that you have that suggest that's going on. And then the second question to that is, or the follow-up question to that, is this really a threat or an opportunity to marketers trying to reach them?
Well, so we've seen we have several studies that I mean, the first thing that we did, and when you go to across every single market, you start to see our MMMs models, the marketing mix models. They hit on the law of diminishing returns, keep on hitting sooner and sooner and sooner on TV, and but it's always been an all-time high. I mean, currently you have the highest penetration, highest reach of TV for this target, and yet when we look at the MMMs, TV keeps on hitting sooner and sooner and sooner. What we do realize is that when they are on TV, and the TV break is on, it's actually this device, the mobile device that is keeping their attention. And actually, we've run several tests on running at the same time through video networks, mobile, on TV. So if you don't get them there, you get them here. And we saw 2x and even 3x effect depending on the network and on the play. So so thinking of the multi-screen experience specifically on millennials, we think is critical because that's how they consume.
But is this a threat or an opportunity for somebody who's trying to reach them and engage with them?
Well, if I can change the question, is
No, only I can change it.
but really what we think is it's a threat if we don't do anything with that. So it is a threat if we don't do it. If we play with it, definitely it's an opportunity. So you can look at one of the examples is Pepsi in Spain. When they came a few years ago, Coke was investing extremely heavily on TV. They overspent. The only way of doing it, they overspent only on digital by having a bigger overspending on digital. All of a sudden, they saw their sales coming back up. So at the moment that you start to do new things faster than your competition, is when you start to see the returns. It's not about being a smart digital marketer. It's being a smart marketer in a digital age, and that's how you have to apply it. So that's how we look at it.
And I think to the point there's a couple of dimensions that come into play. One is authenticity. Another thing is about the increased control expectations of this consumer. So if I take it into the Google world, I guess, or the YouTube world, we're seeing, for example, this multi-screening take effect in TV commercials running and people searching for those brands or those products, authenticating whether the claims made in that ad are true, searching for the products or services. The mobile thing's very, very interesting because you need to split mobile because tablets are not the same as a phone for the usage case and the intent. I think that's really good. And it is about enriching the experience. If people are doing that, how as a brand do you enrich that experience? How do you answer the call? I think the expectations have gone up. You know, you'll see consumers expect brands to be there, and they expect their infrastructure to suit the device they're on. And that's the biggest challenge we've got out there. I mean, we're looking at around, you know, in some categories at Google, a third of our searches are now coming through mobile devices. Yet you look at the top advertisers out there, have they covered the bases on mobile infrastructure? Absolutely not. You know, the ones who do a good job on mobile are the exception to the rule.
Mobile is still only about 1% of total global media spend. And when you look at, 90 million millennials in the US alone, it tells you something's up there. We would be remiss if we did not really kind of delve into social media. According to eMarketer, and this is just looking at the US, 87% of millennials are on social media. Not quite sure who the 13% who are, but never mind. And in other countries, we see even higher rates of penetration among millennials into the 90s. So clearly they're doing it, and they're doing it more than any other age group in terms of time spent. Here's the question. Looking at their intensity of social media usage and mobile, can we necessarily extrapolate into the future that when these millennials become, what are we now, baby boomers or Gen X, when they're 30, 40, 50, and they're having kids and so on, will the intensity and direction of their behavior be the same, or will it change?
Can I just maybe challenge that? And it goes to kind of stereotyping the behavior of a certain generation, if you will. Whilst they might over-index on some behaviors, whether it's social networking using mobiles, those other demographics that under-index on that are still significant, right? There's still, you know, we have older people using smartphones. It's not just the phenomenon contained within that silo of this generation. So as you talk about how these people progress through the life stages, I think there's people already doing that stuff right now at scale. And the danger is you have a marketing strategy that focuses in on one segment and your brand behaves in a way, but it doesn't talk to people from other generations who also act in a similar fashion.
I think one thing that we're seeing with the younger end and social media is having multiple profiles, right? So maybe some people have just Facebook, but then there's lots of people that have Facebook and Instagram and Tumblr and Twitter and
a lot of audience with millennials.
Sort of how you conduct yourself on some of, you know, if you have to be a friend with your mom on your Facebook page, there's going to be certain things that you won't say, or you don't say that you might say over on Twitter. And so I think that kids
in fact, that's
are
why
actually
a lot
navigating
of them are saying they're going to Twitter is because they don't want to be where their mother is or their
right.
You know.
So I mean, I think that it's a very evolving dynamic situation, and you know, but to your point, it's not a bunch of 18-year-olds that are on Facebook. I mean, for it to be that big, it's everybody. So you can't say that it's just a bunch of 18-year-olds that are driving it.
I want to make sure we have room for a couple of questions. So if you can be thinking of questions as we go through this, we're going to open that up in just like a minute. You know, there's a lot of social media going on out there. Millennials are playing with it. Here's a question. Do they actually trust what they read, see, experience, engage with on social media? Do they trust it all?
I mean, I can say some of this is probably anecdotal, but so we operate the websites and all the social media channels for about 35-ish celebrities, ranging from people like Jennifer Lopez to Lauren Conrad to Bethany Frankel. So a lot of our celebrities appeal to millennials. About 50% of our audience is millennials, and on our sites that are the more popular sites, it actually indexes as high as 80% of the registered users being millennials. And I think that, I mean, from a trust standpoint, I would say that they have a healthy skepticism and ability to hone in on the truth through multiple different angles. So, you know, the truth is that the truth is not absolute, and that many times it's merely the collection of a bunch of different things adding up to saying, well, 80% chance this is what it is.
We built a business on that. So
yeah, right. And you know, I have a science background in my previous life, so there really is no absolute truth. We know it to a certain degree. So I think that they know that you can look on Wikipedia, you can Google something, you can go on Twitter, you can go on Tumblr, and then ultimately you'll probably get to the best answer.
They bring their own transparency to the party.
Curating it.
Exactly,
So
that's
that
right.
authentication, I think they can authenticate far quicker than previous generations.
Right, yeah.
let's bring in authentic voices from out there. Is anybody have a question for this elite panel here? We got a question right over here. Do we have a microphone right in the center here? If you could state your name and your company and make sure it's a question.
Thanks. Steve Hammond from Adobe. Quick question. I'm curious how you think the impact of a study like this would be on the resulting content and ads, and how advertisers and companies will reformat their experiences based on these types of studies.
Well, today was day one, so we spend a ton of time sort of workshopping this type of stuff throughout all of our programming groups and marketing groups and, the whole infrastructure at Viacom, and try to come up with different kinds of exercises that will inspire ideas. Because we have found that one of the, a recipe for success is if you can just somehow convey the research, again, in a very experiential way for our executives that are making content, it's like a light goes off in their head, and then they know exactly, it sort of clears the way, and they know what kinds of ideas, what pitches to take, what pitches not to take, who gets it, who doesn't. And so that's, it's a little fuzzy, I suppose, but that's the process.
I think I would say that we're seeing it already reflected in multi-device strategy. So we're seeing the forward-thinking brands acknowledging that the consumer is now, kind of seeing their brand or experiencing their brand across multiple devices. So they're changing the infrastructure and the ads.
I have to add there, and looking at eMarketer's done a whole reports on multitasking, and one of the dirty little secrets is that while there is this huge tendency, particularly for millennials, to multitask, 60-70% of the content that they're looking at on these multiple devices is unrelated. So I think that's the opportunity perhaps for marketers, is to try to line things up so it's, you're actually experiencing the brand across different media. Or you're watching content that you really are interested in, and there's something related that comes at, maybe it's not a typical marketing message, but it's, as you said, part of the conversation.
So the social TV apps that we're developing are meant to do exactly that, enhance the television viewing experience and actually also bring your friends into it.
I think we have time for one more question. Does anybody else have a question in the audience? Going once, twice. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for our panel here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.